We're doing a giveaway. It's not just another regular old BS giveaway, but it's a way to raise awareness to the Wild Sheep Society's Act Now campaign. We're giving away a Kafaru pack, a Whoopee, a Frontiersman Gear knife, a full set of Sitka Storm front gear. Hell, we're even going to throw in some shirts and a hat from our store. The whole goal is to get people to be aware of the Act Now campaign and really send the message that our community wants wildlife to be managed by science, not by whoever celebrity is yelling the loudest. To sign up, get over to our Instagram @WildernessLocals and look for the photo of the sheep with the Act Now giveaway graphic. Get on it, folks. Let's make a difference. This is episode 47 of the Wilderness Locals podcast. On this episode, Wacedog has a chat with Dylan from the Wilderlife in Australia. This podcast is brought to you by Kafaru International, the toughest hunting gear on the planet, bar none. Frontiersman gear, high quality, completely custom, handmade knives made in the heart of the Peace Country. And as always, we're brought to you by Just Shooting Arrows, BC's premier archery shop.
Yeah, man. Thanks for doing this anyway.
Oh, thanks for having me on, mate. Like, if you think whatever I've got to say is worthwhile.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody has a story. Tell everybody kind of where you're from.
So I live in a state of Australia called New South Wales. I live in an area called the New England Tablelands. So it's one of the higher, colder areas of that state. Plenty of good hunting and stuff around here, hunting and fishing and hiking, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I was looking at a bunch of your videos there. It's not what I picture when I see Australia most of the time. It's real pretty country.
Yeah, mate. Well, like anywhere in North America, I suppose, like there's plenty of stuff in the mainstream circles that give you an idea about what USA or Canada looks like, but they're very diverse places, I'm sure, just like Australia is. So we've got a stack of desert and mountains and tropics and all sorts of terrain here. So plenty of cool places to explore.
Yeah, and for people listening, it's pretty hard to figure out what time Australia is to Canada because we kind of struggle to get this lined up.
Oh, yeah. We're like trying to figure out, buddy, I think I'm 16 hours ahead of you, and it would have just been easier for us to say, I'll do it in 24 hours time or whatever. But yeah, maths is not my strong suit.
So what time is it there right now? And what day is it?
It's about 11 a.m. on the 13th of June, Sunday morning.
Yes. Yeah. So you're talking to me from the future because it's 7 o'clock Saturday night here.
Yeah, that's right.
Right on. So yeah, no, I wanted to talk to you just about hunting Australia, and you're a stick bow guy and you kill lots of stuff. So we've been kind of following each other for a little while now, but I like your page and you got a pretty wicked YouTube account. And I don't know, I think you're doing some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, cheers, mate. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think I started following you after I heard you on Kafaru Cast, and it was mainly because Snyder said you had a bunch of funny memes on your page or whatever. So yeah, and I don't know, just sort of pay attention to the stuff we both get up to, I suppose. And I think it's pretty kind of you to call me a stick bow guy because I enjoy my stick bows, but I don't kill a great deal with them yet. Yeah, but I'm sort of working on it and getting better as I go.
Yeah, no, I think everybody's got their own little journey they're on. I hunt with a gun and a bow, but I mostly bow hunt too. But
yeah, man. Well, I hunt with rifles all the time over here, but a lot of it's out of necessity, not just because I like to keep my freezer full, but because a lot of the landowners that allow me to hunt on their properties want me to reduce plenty of the animals as much as possible. So often what I'll do is I'll poke around for a couple of weeks with a bow. I'll get lots of photos and I might get lucky and kill something here and there, but then after a while I'll roll a few things with one of the my guns and feed myself and some friends and do the right thing by the farmer as well.
Is there any like public ground there, or is it all mostly private?
It depends on what state you live in, man, but there's plenty of public access in New South Wales where I live. I don't hunt a great deal of it, but that's just because I'm lucky with some of my private access, but I'm going to start doing some more public land stuff soon. And in Victoria, one of our southern states, there's a heap of public access there. So, yeah, we've got plenty of opportunities down this way for sure.
So New Zealand doesn't have a hunting season. I think they hunt year round. Are you guys kind of like that too? Or you guys have a designated season for everything?
There are some animals where we do have seasons, but for the most part, we don't really have seasons. Like some of our, more exotic species of deer, like hog deer, I think you can only hunt them for 1 month of the year. I might be getting that wrong, but even in my state, New South Wales, it used to be open season on some of the deer species here from about the 1st of March until maybe November, something like that. But we had a really big drought a couple of years ago, so the organisation that looks after the hunting actually got rid of that closed season so they could be shot year round because they were in huge numbers. So it just allowed us to knock the top off the numbers a little bit. So yeah, for the most part, no tags really and no seasons except for some, limited circumstances.
Mm-hmm. So have you kind of are you living now kind of where you grew up? So you kind of always hunted that area, or did you kind of move away a bit from where you grew up?
The area where I live now, I spent some time growing up around here. I didn't hunt a great deal when I was a kid. I mostly went fishing, did a little bit of hunting. And then as I got older and got into my hunting, I was living in a couple of different towns. But because I've got lots of friends up in this area where I live now, I was up this way all the time because I had a lot of good access. And that's one of the reasons that, influenced me to move back up here as well. But I like the weather, the fishing opportunities as well as the hunting are really good. We're not real far from the coast. So if I want to go to the beach or go for a saltwater fish, it's only a couple of hours away. Yes, and I don't really intend on leaving this area ever, really. I'll probably die up this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you kind of get going in hunting, and who introduced you to that?
Well, when we were kids, like we had firearms in the house, and our dad was a really serious hunter. So we were always into the idea of being hunters. We just never got to do it a great deal. And we're very much a fishing family. My dad makes fishing lures. So we spent a lot of time in the outdoors doing that. And then as we got a little bit older, we actually realized, in our early adulthood, when I say we, I mean my brothers and I, that there was a lot of public land access in the state that we lived in. So we decided to jump through all the hoops that you have to get your firearms license in Australia. And we just started doing it like that. And it's probably about 10 years ago now. And now it's basically all I do.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. You always seems like you got something that you're butchering up there, because you guys got some hogs too, right?
Yeah, mate. Well, look, when I was a kid, I'm talking over 20 years ago now, the idea of hunting deer not so much in Australia, but hunting deer in the area where I live right now, it was very much, like a bit of a secret society. There was limited private access, and seeing a deer was very unusual. So when we talk about hunting in Australia, 20 or especially 30 years ago in this area, it was basically just about pig hunting, besides the typical foxes and rabbits and maybe some wild goats and that kind of thing. And I'd say certainly within the last 10 years, the deer have really increased their range and their populations have just exploded. So while I probably enjoy hunting pigs more than I enjoy hunting deer, but most of what I hunt at the moment is the fallow deer.
Yeah, you just killed a pretty nice fallow buck too. Here, well, when is their rut for you guys?
It starts in late March and goes for most of April. So I figured that's probably similar to like the elk over in North America starting in September and maybe going into October, I suppose. And yeah, he was a decent buck. He's not the biggest one I've killed, but he's pretty close. But I did see a few much bigger ones, but I spent so much time with my stick bow, I just couldn't really make it happen. So I went out with the rifle and got it done just to give myself a feeling of success for the first time in a little while, which was good.
Yeah, I like that. I like it. I like it when guys aren't scared to pick up the gun just to get some success under their belt. I hate it. I hate seeing guys struggle with the bow and then they become frustrated. So I'm always a big proponent of picking up the equalizer stick.
Yeah, and I feel the same way, mate. And especially like in the rural area where I live now, there are plenty of people who hunt and we can go hunting pretty much as much as what we want to. But I feel a little bad for some people I see who live in their cities and they might only get out a couple of times a year, and that might equate to a couple of opportunities to even come to full draw each year. So when I picked up the stick bow, I was perfectly comfortable making that decision because I've got so much access and I can see so many animals every day. So I don't necessarily have to really grind it out and try my guts out for the sake of getting an opportunity all the time. So yeah, I shoot a lot more stuff with a rifle, like I mentioned before, and it gives me good opportunities to work on my knife skills and a lot of my wild game cooking skills, and I feed lots of people. I give plenty of venison and other wild game to farmers that allow me to hunt on their places as well. And as much as I enjoy shooting my stick bows, I do enjoy picking up my rifles. I've got some nice rifles and they're good fun to use. So yeah, it's all variety. It's all good fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. What kind of guns are you shooting over there? And what's the you should touch on the Australian gun laws. I don't know if they're close to Canada, but
okay. Look, first things first, everybody has probably heard of something called the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania. Bloke went crazy and shot up a bunch of innocent people. So that was in 1996. And from that moment on, a lot of our laws changed. I don't know, like a lot of our laws seem fairly silly to me. Like if you want to own even a semi-automatic rimfire, say like a Ruger 1022, you have to have a special class of license that only somebody who, might be a primary producer can get, or there might be a couple of other guidelines. But owning a semi-automatic centerfire rifle in Australia is a very difficult thing to do unless you're a contract shooter or something. But you have to apply for your license. You got to do a written test, a practical test, and then you make your application. And the registry or the governing body that looks after all of those applications is extremely understaffed. So some of these things take a really long time. I think when I did this years ago, I might have made my application in December, and it might have been the following May that I got my first firearms in my hands, because every time we want to buy a firearm, at least in my state, we have to fill out what's called a permit to acquire. So even though I might own, a half a dozen rifles now, I still have to essentially put an application in to buy another one and prove to the government that I'm a fit and proper person capable of owning another rifle, which is a bit of a pain, but that's just what we've got to do. But in my safe at the moment, I've got a couple of 22s, a 222, a 243, a 30-30, a 300 Win Mag, and a 9.3 by 62. And I'd say the vast majority of the stuff that my wife and I shoot is either with her 243 or with my 300 Win Mag. They're the rifles we use the most when we're out walking around and stalking. And if I'm shooting a lot of animals at night under the spotlight from my vehicle, I'll usually take my 222 because most of what happens at nighttime is the headshots, so I don't really need that much power.
What are you hunting at night? Just hogs and stuff?
Depends, mate. Like in the past, I've helped out a lot of people with professionally shooting kangaroos under permits, which is a fairly complicated thing to explain. But long story short, there's a lot of the shooting of kangaroos for the human consumption market over here, like a commercial harvest. I've also done plenty of fox and rabbit shooting and pig or hog shooting under spotlight as well, which is good fun if you get into a big mob of pigs. But during the drought, I was actually shooting a lot of deer under the light as well, which I didn't really enjoy doing very much, but it was a really good way for me to be able to knock their numbers down for the farmer. And like I said, hitting him in the head means you can harvest all of the meat. So I wasn't trying to pretend I was an elite hunter by shooting all those deer in the spotlight, but it was another one of those regulations that got dropped by the governing body. Like when they closed, or when they got rid of the closed seasons, they also got rid of the laws about, or the rules about shooting them under the light. So you can't do it on the public land, but on private land you can shoot them at night time now with spotlights or thermal scopes and that sort of thing. And it's an effective way of getting the numbers down. It's not real fun, but it's good to have a big supply of venison when the time calls for it.
Yeah, it always seems like there's a family member that needs some meat, even around my house. Somebody needs some elk or something all the time. Definitely. Yeah. So, how did you kind of get going into the stick bow world?
I had a compound bow. It was a few years ago, I started to take my exercise and my lifestyle a little bit more seriously. So I was getting into my fitness a bit more, and I became aware of a lot of the stuff online about, being a bow hunter and being really fit with people like Cameron Haynes and that. And I shot a few things with my compound bow and I enjoyed it, but I never really warmed to it. I accidentally dry fired one and blew it up, and it just turned me off a little bit. It seemed like a bit of a hassle, and I didn't like the idea that I couldn't work on the compound bow by myself, because there aren't really very many archery shops around here in Australia, certainly in my area. So most people who have that gear do it on their own. And then I don't know, it might have been around the time when people like Aaron Snyder were making a lot more noise on social media about stick bows. And I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in the Northern Territory here in Australia. We've just been friends online for a few years, and he told me he had quite a few stick bows and he was looking at getting out of it. So he sent me a recurve bow. And that really got me started. And basically from then I've been buying other bows and working on my form and my arrow building and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, him sending me a stick bow is what got me started for sure.
What was the bow he sent you?
Mate, everybody I tell this just can't believe how lucky I got, but he sent me a Black Widow PCH. And because he was, it might have been an issue with his form, but he told me, he's like, look, mate, I've got this bow. There might be an issue with it because every 20 or 30 shots I make with it, the string comes off. So I said, oh, okay, righto. So he said, look, you can have this bow if you are happy to try and sort out what the problem is. And at the time I'd heard the name Black Widow bows and I understood they were pretty good, but I didn't realize exactly how lucky I was. And I said, oh, mate, well, if the limbs are twisted, can I just buy some new limbs? And he said, oh, yeah, sure, but they're fairly expensive. And again, I didn't realize what fairly expensive meant either until I looked it up. They're a hell of a lot of money. Anyway, it's the bow is 65 pounds at 28. So I strung it up a couple of times and I couldn't even come close to shooting it properly. I rated myself. I thought I was fairly strong, but the technique just wasn't there. So pretty quickly, I had another friend of mine source me some used limbs from a bloke in America. So they were 54 pounds at 28. So once I'd put those on the riser, I could actually work on things a lot better. And I've since sent the riser and those limbs to a boyer here in Australia who lives a few hours away, and he had a look at the limbs and determined that there's no twist in them at all. So, it might have just been an issue with the string that the bloke had on there or whatever. But I'm shooting the 65-pound limbs a fair bit now, fairly confidently, but I get tired pretty quickly. But yeah, hell of a nice bow. I've only killed one thing with those 65-pound limbs so far, but yeah, I'll keep working on it and get a few more things on the deck here shortly, I hope.
Yeah, 65 pounds. That's a pretty heavy pull.
Oh yeah, mate. You see people online talk about don't overbow yourself, and it's a lot different to a compound. And like most young men, I thought, oh yeah, well, that's clearly just for anybody that's not me, So because I was pulling a 70-pound compound and I was going to the gym a fair bit, and man, I think it even took me a couple of goes to get the confidence to string it using a stringer, because as I was standing on the stringer and pulling up, I just thought there's just no way it could be that difficult to pull this thing. Yeah, he told me it might be a little bit too stiff, and everybody I talk to says it's a hell of a lot of bow for your first bow. So, besides those lighter limbs, I've got a couple of other lighter bows as well. And yeah, I didn't really pick up that many issues to work through having owned such a heavy bow to begin with, but you could definitely see how you could get yourself in a fair bit of trouble with snap shooting and not coming to anchor properly and all that with a heavy bow to start out with.
Well, that's not your bow you're using right now, is it? I thought you had a different one.
The bow I've got now, or the one I've been using now, it's a 65-pound longbow, and the bloke who built that for me is the boyer that I sent this Black Widow to see if he could spot any limb twist, because on his website he mentions that he runs a full bowyer service, so he's done repairs and things like that on bows before. So I just sent him an email like, look, mate, I've got this bow. I don't really know if there's a problem with it, but I'd appreciate it if I could send it to you and have a bit of a look. And he strung it up. He fired it a few times. He had people watching him draw it, and he did all of his little tests, and he just couldn't, for the life of him, find a problem with the bow, which I was really happy about. And after having the conversations on the phone with the fella, I talked myself into going down. I was on my way back up here from a wedding one weekend or whatever, and I stopped into this bloke's shop and got measured up for a custom longbow, because he's very passionate about his longbows. He doesn't make recurve bows. So the one that he built for me now is 65 pounds at my draw length. So it's a little bit stiffer than that Black Widow, but it's still a beautiful bow to shoot all the same.
Yeah, for sure. I've never had a shot a Black Widow, but I know they're pretty popular in the US, and I know a few guys up here that have them too.
Yeah, well, it's much easier to shoot than the longbow, because the longbow is just so light in the hand. It's when I come to full draw with the longbow, what we talk about, like your sight pin float, or the float of the point of my arrow is just all over the place, because it takes so much energy to keep it steady. Whereas the Black Widow, especially with a Selway quiver on it and 6 arrows, it's just so much heavier in the hands. So even though earlier in the draw cycle, I guess it's a little bit more difficult to pull back, the longbow is kind of a more consistent draw in a way. That Black Widow just weighs more than any other bow that I've got. So I know that's a problem for some people that don't like carrying a heavy bow around, but man, it makes it easy to shoot. It's like the Black Widow's a heavy barrel varmint rifle, and the longbow I've got, it's like a lightweight mountain rifle. They can both do the same thing, but one of them's a hell of a lot easier to shoot accurately.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know that Australia has quite a rich hunting history, and there is a lot of hunting that happens there. I've watched some on YouTube, different guys. There was a guy, I think his name was the Captain or something. He hunts a lot of scrub bulls and stuff like that. But I think he's more northern Australia.
Captain Bowman, is that the bloke?
I think so.
Yeah, I think he actually lives further south, I believe, and hunts a lot of our sambar deer with his stick bows. But I know the video you're talking about with that scrub bull. But I don't know. I don't quite know what the story is. But New Zealand's the awareness that other people around the world have about the hunting culture in New Zealand is so much better than the awareness that people have about Australia. And I think it's because maybe for people from North America, it's probably a little bit easier to just, sort some of your stuff out online and then just fly to New Zealand and start hunting straight away. But we've got a hell of a lot of hunting in Australia, a hell of a lot of hunters. Lots of different species of game to chase around in lots of different environments and terrain. And it's it's not so much like it's a secret from the rest of the world, but people don't realize. So every time I talk to people from the Northern Hemisphere in particular, they're always surprised when they hear just how many rifles we might be allowed to own, or just how many animals we might kill every year, because it's a hell of a lot more animals than what a lot of people in North America would kill every year, you know? So it's just a different way of doing things.
Yeah, for sure. What's the, I see you kill a bunch of feral goats. What's the kind of the story with that? Like, how many of those are there?
Mate, the goats is an interesting area at the moment. They're just basically, we've got a couple of different classifications for animals here in Australia. So some animals are classified as feral, which means they've escaped a domestic environment or escaped captivity in some way. Other animals are referred to as introduced game animals. So the fallow deer, for example, that I'm hunting here in this area, they're not technically classed as feral because they were intentionally released so we could chase them. But a lot of people refer to them as ferals or feral pests because their numbers are just out of control now. So with the goats and the pigs, they were just like accidental releases. And it's funny because to people not from Australia, they just look like farm animals walking around the scrub, but they're as wild an animal as any of our deer or our foxes or pigs or anything like that. And a lot of people hunted them almost limitlessly quite a few years ago, but they exist in massive numbers in some areas, typically the western areas of New South Wales and Queensland, where the properties are really big and, they can sort of get into the scrub and people don't find them too much. But now there's less goat hunting than what there used to be because so many property owners out there are rounding them up and they're selling them. So there's a massive market. I believe we export a lot of our goat meat to different countries in the Middle East. So I've been on some properties out west. When I say out west, I mean western New South Wales, west of my state, where the pigs and the rabbits and the foxes is totally kill as many as you want, but the goats have been off limits unless I was prepared to pay for each one that I shot. So a lot of farmers, particularly in the really dry areas that would normally be farming a lot of sheep, the goats are doing much better. So they might round up or trap the goats once a year, and that supplements their income pretty well. Yeah, because some of the pictures of the goats that you're killing are pretty cool. Like their horns are pretty big. Oh yeah, mate. They're an interesting game animal. Their habits are different to deer and pigs in that goats are active pretty well all day. So some of the spots where I've been able to go hunting them, and this is another reason why it's so good to be a stick bow hunter over here, you can just walk around some of the scrub and you'll have opportunities literally all day. So a big billy from the mountains with a big curly set of horns is a really cool trophy. And all of the young ones obviously are fantastic to eat as well. So, yeah, they're a fun animal to chase. If you get a nice young one that's not too stinky, then their skins are really good to tan as well. My wife's tanned a couple of skins here recently, which look pretty cool. Do you have scrub bulls where you are right now? I believe there are pockets of scrub bulls in some areas around here, but they're not really anything like the numbers that you see in the northern part of Australia. So what we talk about, like northern Western Australia, the Northern Territory, and then far north Queensland, that's where the big populations of scrub bulls are for sure. And I've killed a couple of scrub bulls when I've been up in far north Queensland before, and they're a really, really fun animal to hunt for sure. And what's the story with them? They were kind of escaped captivity at one time probably, or? Yeah, mate, same kind of thing as a lot of the goats. They, like, people talk about them now as clean skin animals in that some of these properties or stations in the northern parts of Australia are so big that it's kind of hard to manage where like a station owner's private cattle are and where maybe some stuff on the neighbouring properties are. So there's a lot of movement between properties and also what's referred to as traditional owner land, because there's a lot of land up there that's owned by Indigenous people. So there's a lot of movement between those areas as well. But typically speaking, they're just cattle that have escaped. They've bred amongst themselves enough where they kind of look like their own species in a way, like they might not instantly be recognizable as 100% Brahman or 100% Shorthorn or something like that. And they're a pretty cagey animal. That a lot of people talk about them as being potentially more dangerous than our Asiatic water buffalo, but I've never hunted a water buffalo, so I couldn't really tell you. But mate, they're just these massive animals that can be pretty cranky, and they exist up there completely, of their own volition. And their ancestors escaped probably 100 years ago or more.
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube of guys that catch them with them Jeeps, and they have them them arms. They drive up beside them and they drop them arms over the bull's neck. If you got to find that video on YouTube. That's pretty amazing how you guys catch some things. Yeah, mate.
I've seen a few of those videos, and I've got people I know, they make a living being what they call bull catchers. So often what will happen is people will go through and muster a really large property. They might all be on bikes and have dogs, or they even use helicopters, and they'll round up all these cattle and they'll sell them. And then people will go through on quad bikes afterwards and pick up a lot of the stragglers, and it's often bulls. And the way some of those people ride circles around these bulls and jump off and tip them over and tie them up, I mean, it's a pretty hectic way of life, but they're almost a different breed of people up there too. It's a pretty crazy thing to do.
I think the one video I watched, the guy jumped out of the helicopter and grabbed one or something.
Yeah. Oh, mate, it's gnarly up there for sure. Yeah.
I'd like to go hang out with those guys for a day. That'd be fun.
Yeah, man, I'd love to hang around doing that kind of thing. Even just hang on the back of someone's bike with a camera and get a bunch of video and photos. It'd be a really cool thing to document, I reckon.
Yeah. So, kind of what do you got planned here? Are you hunting? What are you hunting right now, I guess?
At the moment, I'm basically just poking around whenever I've got some spare time, looking for pigs or deer. I'll do a bit more fishing for Murray cod, one of our native species here, until about September, which is a closed season for them. And I'm really looking to try and hone my skills, especially my stalking skills, on some deer, and hopefully try and get onto some deer with one of my stick bows before the rut comes around next April, so I can try and land myself in a good position to be able to shoot confidently during the rut next April. But typically speaking, like I've always got a 2-week holiday period over late June, early July, and I was gearing up to go down to Victoria to chase sambar deer on a backpack hunt again this year, which I did last year. But Victoria, for whatever reason, seems to be the state of Australia that's having a really hard time keeping the lid on COVID-19. So when I was up the mountains last year with no phone reception, I think it was a couple of days after our hunt started, they locked down the state. So me getting out of the state was a bit of a pain in the butt, and I had to isolate for 14 days when I got home, even though I was nowhere near COVID. And funnily enough, Victoria's going in the same kind of path right now. So normally I'd be going down there to chase sambar, but I think I'm going to spend my time just around here, cutting some firewood and going on hunts at most of my regular spots. But in terms of what I normally do at this time of year, mate, anything between April and I suppose September is when I do most of my meat hunting, because the weather's cool enough that I can shoot some stuff and I don't have to worry about the flies or the heat spoiling any of the meat. So, I'll do a few camp outs here with my wife and a few other friends of mine and just try and whack up a few more deer for the freezer, and maybe put together a few more how-to skinning and butchering on the ground kinds of videos, because I like doing that, and maybe helping out people who need a bit of help, that sort of thing too. So there's always plenty going on here.
Yeah. You should kind of plug your YouTube account. You got some pretty wicked videos, and and good quality, good editing too. I was scrolling through them here a couple nights ago.
Yeah, cheers, man. That's kind of you to say. Yeah. Well, yeah, like it's on Instagram. My name is just Wilderlife, WILDERLIFE. There's an underscore either side, but if you just search Wilderlife, it'll come up. And my YouTube channel is called The Wilderlifer, WILDERLIFER. And it's just a name I came up with a few years ago talking to my dad, because essentially what my wife and I like to do is live a life that is slightly more wild than what most people in this day and age do. So there's going to be plenty more content on my YouTube channel in the future. I think a lot of my videos are pretty schmick in terms of the quality of the footage I get. I spend a lot of time behind the camera. I don't, they're certainly not like professional film quality edits, but there's some pretty decent stuff on there, plenty of fishing and hunting and a bit more cooking and stuff as well. So yeah, if anyone's keen to have a look at it, by all means. Like, I'm not really out to get famous or anything like that, but if people find it interesting, especially from other parts of the world, then it might strike up some cool conversations. So yeah, have a look if you can.
Yeah, no, I watched it. I really enjoyed it. But going back to your firewood thing, you sent me a video the other day of that godly spider about the size of a frying pan.
Yeah.
What the fuck was that?
Look, that's a spider we got over here. It's called a huntsman spider. They're one of the biggest spiders that most people would come across on a fairly regular basis, and they're the kind of they're the species of spider that you see in all those internet memes about Australia, because huntsmans, you find them in your house all the time. I find them cutting firewood because they on a tree that's been dead for a little while, they'll often live between the bark and the trunk, but they're not venomous at all. So in terms of the scariest spiders we have here in Australia, they're not even on the radar compared to the other ones that can really put a hurt on you for sure. But yeah, they're pretty gnarly looking. So yeah, I knew that you and Ty would like me putting that in the Instagram chat there, because it's a typical Australian thing, saying big spiders and other kinds of scary, bugs and snakes and whatever.
Is there lots of snakes where you are too?
My wife's seen one snake since we've moved into this property about a year and a half ago, but it's like, yeah, people I talk to in the Northern Hemisphere are always interested in the idea of snakes. And I tell them, like, there are snakes just everywhere. It's just a part of life. And even though the vast majority of our of the most venomous snakes in the world come from Australia, your chance of getting bitten by one is very small. Like, I'm not entirely up with the statistics in your part of the world, but I would hazard a guess that there are plenty more people who have dodgy encounters with grizzly bears or brown bears every year compared to what we have here in Australia every year with venomous snakes. Like I said, I'm not entirely up to speed with that, but I would put money on that being the case for sure. We don't really, have a massive issue with snakes. You just see them all over the place and you just kind of walk around them or take a couple of photos and keep moving. It's just the way it is. So
you posted too the other day that you got some frost happening at your place. Is that normal or what?
Yeah, mate. At this time of year, like it's currently winter for us, the area I live called the New England Tablelands, it's one of the colder regions in Australia. It's not the coldest, but it's pretty cold. And like our property is 1,000 meters above sea level, which for, people who live in the Stone Age, it's probably somewhere around 3,000 feet, I guess. But there are other towns around me that might be about 1,300 meters above. They're some of the colder places in the state. I know that's nothing compared to other places in North America, but for Australia, that's fairly high. And yeah, we were really, really gearing up for a good drop of snow there a couple of days ago, but we did not get it, and a few other places around us did, and that bummed me out because I've never been able to walk around in the snow and take photos besides when I've been down to the snowfields in what we call the Snowy Mountains in far south, the southern areas of New South Wales. So maybe there'll be another big drop again at some point before winter's over, but typically we're good for like one snowdrop a year in this area. Frosts are plenty, that's for sure, though.
Yeah, as a Canadian with snow, I don't think you're missing a whole bunch.
yeah. Well, like it's a novelty for us, man. Like if I lived in an area that was, covered by snow for months every year, I'd probably get over it too. But like I told you, like a couple of days before this snow was predicted, where people were talking about how they were going to get to work and having to shut highways. And Australia, at least this area, is just not equipped to deal with snow. So every time it snows, people basically just stop whatever the hell they're doing for a day. Like none of our houses or anything are really set up to deal with like proper snowfalls like what you guys would get. So that's one of the reasons why I like living here as well. We get the nice cold weather and especially beautiful winter weather. But when we talk about really, really cold, it's still fairly livable, whereas for you guys, you probably have to almost shut down for a couple months every year, I imagine, wouldn't you?
We seem to power through okay. We're set up for it though, right? So
yeah.
But yeah, maybe switching gears back to hunting a bit. I did watch some videos before on them samba deer. They're pretty hard to hunt too. Not too many guys kill them with bows, I don't think.
Nah, mate. Look, I'm not like up to speed with all of the hunting circles down that way, but there really aren't that many people that chase them with bows, either compounds or stick bows. One of the reasons why they're so difficult to hunt is because a lot of the stuff they live in is fairly thick. So I'm not sure whether I've mentioned it on any of my Instagram stories or whatever, but I'm colorblind. So I have a really hard time seeing red blood on the green ground. So if I were to hit one with a bow, which would be a massive achievement in itself, it might be really difficult for me to find it. But they're kind of spoken about as being the premier game animal here in Australia. I know a lot of people from overseas think about our water buffalo as being a cool animal to hunt as well, but the public land opportunities on samba deer is what really elevates them, in my opinion, to this prime time game animal. There's just so much access to them, and it's in some of the most beautiful country, and plenty of that is up in a big national park in Victoria called Alpine National Park, and a lot of that's well over 1,400 meters above sea level. So there are parts of it that have snow in it every year. Every winter for a couple of months at a time. And they're the biggest species of deer here pretty well, although the jury's kind of out on that because red deer can get pretty big as well. But it's just amazing to see how such big deer like the samba can disappear so easily. They've got a bit of a sneaky way about them, and a lot of people here talk about that as maybe being because they've evolved in Southeast Asia being hunted by leopards and tigers and things, so they've got to be a lot more sneaky as opposed to some of the other deer we've got from Europe that are mainly chased by wolves and things like that.
Yeah, so the samba deer were kind of a release thing too, or must have been.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. They were released by the government, so we would be able to enjoy fantastic deer hunting. And I haven't Googled it recently, but I believe samba were released in Victoria as early as the 1830s. So there's a very big established culture around hunting samba deer, especially in Victoria, but they're moving further north every year. Like there are samba not particularly far from me here in northern New South Wales at the moment, from what I understand. There's also a population in the Northern Territory in an area called Coburg Peninsula, but you don't hear a great deal about them. But it's actually interesting the way the idea about hunting culture has changed in Australia over the last 20 years, because similar to the deer hunting in my area, there was a time when even seeing a samba deer in Victoria was an amazing thing. And now they are absolutely everywhere. And a lot of hunters are very annoyed about the fact that the government is shooting a hell of a lot of them from helicopters in either in public land areas where hunters do have access, or in areas where hunters don't have access and the government does not allow us in there, and the government's perfectly happy to go in and shoot a heap of them and leave them there, which a lot of us see as an incredible waste. So there are a few sides to the story in terms of the hunting culture and appreciation of the animals we have here in Australia.
Yeah, I never got that whole theory of let the government shoot them and push them in a pit. but we as hunters can't go in and harvest them and take the meat. I just never wrapped my head around that.
Yeah, man. And like there's a lot of national parks here in New South Wales where I live that are just absolutely chock full of game animals. And it's impossible for the government to manage their numbers effectively. The cost involved would be huge. And shooters are not allowed in, or shooters and hunters are not allowed in those national parks. So the animals just breed up insanely. And then I'm not sure how much money it costs the taxpayers every year to put these helicopters up there, but it would not be a small amount of money by any means. And the fact that they're getting shot and left there, and I mean, we could go in there and try and do a decent job for free, essentially, but it's almost like it's more important to some people in government departments that we don't get to actually enjoy going out bush and hunting animals and eating them. It's like sacrilege to say that people might enjoy going in there and doing that, even though it might save the taxpayer a hell of a lot of money.
What's kind of the pulse on the people from Australia on hunting? Are the majority of people pretty okay with it, or do you guys have a pretty strong anti-hunting culture?
Look, based on what I see, Matt, it's like anywhere. Like there's a really strong anti-hunting culture, there's a really strong hunting culture, and then there's a massive amount of people in the middle who aren't very exposed to things and they don't really feel particularly strongly one way or the other. One thing I will say is when I first started out and I was having conversations with people who weren't into hunting, it was very easy for me to default to the idea that most of what I was hunting was a feral animal, so they don't belong here anyway. So, it was almost like, so you don't get to tell me I can't go hunting because I'm trying to save the environment, But in recent years, I've shifted my tone a little bit because, first things first, I really enjoy doing it, so I shouldn't shy away from that fact. But the other side of the coin is if we didn't have any of these introduced animals here, then we wouldn't really have a great deal of animals worth hunting besides, some of our duck species and things like that. So at the moment, I would say there are a lot of hunters who are trying to shift the way hunting is seen in the public eye to be widely accepted as a part of our culture that a lot of people do to feed themselves than anything else. Because, the idea of going out and killing a heap of feral pigs is just hardly anybody in Australia bats an eyelid except for the absolutely extreme anti-hunters. But even people who live in cities that don't know much about our environment, they understand that pigs and rabbits and foxes and cats especially need to go because they're a huge problem for our agricultural industry and, of course, our natural environment. So, yeah, there are a few different stories there, and navigating all of them at once is a bit of a tricky thing. But I think in the end, we'll come out, I don't know if you'd say on top, but I think there are plenty of people who are trying to change that conversation in terms of making it a very big cultural idea. And, we got a long way to go with it, though, of course. Yeah.
Circling back to the cat thing, because I know I've seen pictures of your people over there, hunters or whoever, that holding up a cat and it looks just like a house cat. Well, it is a house cat, but maybe touch on the problem. Because I've read about it, but maybe touch on the problem about the feral cats so people know.
Sure, mate. Well, look, Australia as a landmass just doesn't have a great deal of larger four-legged mammalian predators on it, so a lot of our smaller, furry, cute animals, or a lot of our bird species, they haven't evolved with defense strategies or behaviors to be able to deal with something like a cat. Even the dingo, which is referred to as the Australian native dog, it's my understanding that they were introduced here by some Indigenous people only about 10,000 years ago. So even calling them native at the moment, I understand it's like a little bit of a grey area, but I'm not sure what the statistics are, but cats and foxes are responsible for killing just, probably millions of our native animals every single year. And it seems the cats are harder to control than the foxes. I'm not sure if it's something about their behavior or whatever. I've got friends of mine who who work in this area in some of the national parks, and they are trapping an animal called a quoll, a Quoll, which is like a little predator that we have, which is similar in size to a cat. But a lot of the cats and foxes spreading throughout these areas is knocking the quoll numbers around because they're competing for the same kinds of food sources. So, in general, I would say most hunters in Australia have, a rage towards cats, I suppose. Like, there are plenty of people in Australia who just have an absolute hatred for cats, potentially unjustified because, of course, it's like the individual cat can't really help it. But, plenty of our native birds are getting knocked around by them big time.
Yeah, I know. I've heard guys on other podcasts, Australian guys, talk about shooting cats from tree stands and stuff, and I always get a good chuckle out of that.
Oh yeah, man. Oh, look, it's like in the circles that I go in, there could be people going out on a big pig hunt or a deer hunt or whatever, and if they see a cat, it just turns into a cat hunt. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like they could be stalking some really big pigs, and if they see a cat, that thing is getting shot on the top of the priority list.
Yeah, I know, it's wild. So how far are you from New Zealand then? And have you ever hunted New Zealand, or is it kind of taboo for Aussies to hunt New Zealand?
No, mate, plenty of Australians hunt New Zealand. My wife and I were pretty well gearing up to get over there within the next few months. But that was a plan we established before COVID-19 was a thing. So it's a bit tricky now, but for us to get to New Zealand, I'd have to fly from the town where I live now to Sydney, which is just over an hour flight. And then from Sydney to New Zealand, I'm not sure how long that flight is, but it's not real expensive. There's a huge number of Australian hunters who go to New Zealand every year, and they recently opened up a travel bubble between some parts of Australia and New Zealand. And so some of my friends went over there and they were hunting, but because there are a couple of COVID-19 cases in New South Wales, they quickly shut the travel bubble to New South Wales. So some of my friends who went over there recently were from Victoria, but they might have shut that travel bubble again now, seeing as Victoria was just in Melbourne itself was in a lockdown for a week, just over a week ago. So yeah, it's all tricky, but we'd really like to get over there. I'd just like to go over there taking photos, honestly. It just looks like a phenomenal place, but my wife is really keen on shooting a chamois and tanning its skin and bringing it back. So I'm like, yeah, cool, man, whatever floats your boat. So I don't know, once COVID settles down properly, I'm sure we'll get over there at some point soon and go for some hunts and fishing and all that good stuff.
Yeah, because I read somewhere, because I guess they're called red stag, hey?
Yeah, well, everyone it seems like the North Americans refer to them as red stags, and we just call them red deer. I think a lot of you guys refer to them as stags because you say you're talking about elk as bulls or something. I'm not sure. Like, we just call them red deer. Maybe a few people call them stags, but yeah.
But because it's kind of the same thing with their numbers too. It was being controlled by the government, or still is, isn't it?
Yeah, mate. There's a bit of reading you can do about New Zealand. They've had a big commercial industry of professionally harvesting red deer out of helicopters and that sort of thing. And within the last couple of years, there was the same kind of thing happening with the tahr, where the government was really trying to reduce the tahr numbers, which was a bit of a controversial thing for a variety of reasons, because the tahr are actually endangered in their natural habitat in the Himalayas. So New Zealand having this stronghold of tahr is probably a good thing for tahr in the long run. And I'm not sure if the government really considered just how many millions of dollars they would lose in tourism if they would have wiped the tahr out. But I think some of that culling has stopped. I'm not too sure, but I know there are some organisations working at trying to stop that from happening.
Yeah, that's what I was reading about, is just kind of how they were calling. But it's kind of weird for us here because we don't really have big government calls like that, but we have a lot of predators on the landscape. So it kind of seems like we're always fighting predators just to keep ungulates around, you know?
Yeah, man. Well, it's like something that I like to watch you being involved in is a lot of your bear hunting and your wolf hunting, because that's obviously we don't really get to do a great deal of anything similar besides maybe shooting feral dogs in some areas. But like I do a lot of listening to North American podcasts and plenty of reading about that stuff. And I saw that I think Idaho recently got the okay to kill a heap of their wolves, which might be good for their elk population. But and there's obviously problems with the British Columbia banning the grizzly hunts, and people are getting attacked left, right, and center. And yeah, when I see that kind of thing, I think, man, as much as these Northern Hemisphere people are freaking out about our spiders and our snakes, like I reckon the bears would be a hell of a lot scarier. But when I first got started in hunting, I really like bears and wolves, and I didn't. It's not like I didn't agree with it. I just couldn't really come at the idea of doing that. But now, if someone were to ask me the animal I'd like to go to North America to hunt above anything else, I'd probably say a black bear, just because it seems so accessible, and I'm really interested to see what they taste like. Yeah,
for sure. We actually just had in the last 3 weeks, in Alberta, we've had 2 people killed by grizzlies. So our grizzly population is well and alive, and they won't open the hunt up either. So it's kind of frustrating to just watch, people getting hurt and killed and mauled, and they won't open it up, because what happened was when they banned the hunt. Now we have so many generations of bear that just haven't been hunted by people, and they're not scared. So they don't really care. And if you get between them or whatever, they'll tear you up.
Yeah, mate. And I imagine it's the same kind of people who use language along the lines of, if we just leave them alone, then nature will take care of itself. And because there are so many human beings on the planet now, we have to do things to manage these animals. It's the same here with kangaroos. Like there are far more kangaroos on our landscape here in Australia now than what there were before European settlement. And so people in the city like to say we should all be leaving the kangaroos alone. And I'm like, well, you got to think about it. We've turned Australia from a fairly desolate sort of place into a massive agricultural environment. So there's a lot more water in terms of dams and stuff on the landscape than what there used to be. And we've got huge amounts of crops in areas that didn't have quite as much food as before. So it only makes sense that there are a whole bunch more animals around to want to eat that stuff. And unless we try and keep a lid on the kangaroo numbers, they'll end up getting their population so big where they'll start to die of starvation anyway. So it makes sense. That's why we have such a big commercial harvest on kangaroos. Like I'm not sure how many millions get killed every year, but it'll be plenty.
Funny story. Back in the day, I used to shoot Zilor arrows. Have you ever heard of those?
Yeah, a friend of mine used to use them a few years ago. Yeah.
So he sold anyway. I don't think they exist anymore, but that guy, I think that had those arrows in Australia, he started up a kangaroo jerky operation. So I kind of figured there was some kangaroo, a lot of kangaroos there.
Oh, mate, it's an amazing thing to see. Like, there's not a great deal on YouTube about it. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked it up for a while, but they go out in these big vehicles. It's usually a single cab Toyota Land Cruiser, and there's a big rack on the back, and they've got pins to hang the kangaroos on, and you'd shoot anywhere. Oh, it depends on the country you're in, but I've seen people shoot up to 50 kangaroos a night. They hang them up on the truck, they knock the guts out, and they drive them all in and put them in a big commercial refrigeration unit. And once a week, a company will come and pick them all up and take them away, and they use the skins for various stuff, and they make a whole bunch of like the kangaroo meat ends up in restaurants and supermarkets. And when you watch somebody who's really good at it go, like their skills with the knife and the rifle is just second to none. The way they can take an animal apart so quickly. And seeing people work like that and helping out some of my friends who do that's probably one of the things that's helped me build a lot of my confidence with my wild game and my knife skills as well,
So how many kangaroos, like what's their term cycle? If a kangaroo gets bred, how long till she's having, what do they call them? Little ones, I don't know. Cubs?
They call them joeys. Yeah.
Joeys, right.
Yeah, cubs. Mate, I don't know. Like, I think it might be once a year or once every 2 years. I don't know for certain. In fact, I really should know. But one thing I do know is that they can actually withhold their estrus cycle in a way if the conditions aren't right. So if it's a really dry year, they can actually hold back from coming into season effectively, so they don't get bred until it's right again. And I believe, God, if any other Aussies listen to this, I'll be like, man, you should know this stuff. But I believe they might be able to have one joey that's out of the pouch that's kind of on the verge of leaving, and then have another one in the pouch, like a really, really little one that's just hard to suckle, because they're essentially born, I don't know if people over there know much about marsupials, they're essentially born as like a little pink, hairless, blind thing, and they come out of the womb and they go up in the pouch and they live in the pouch and finish growing. But yeah, it's not like they don't have a whole litter of joeys like what, a wild pig. A pig could have maybe a couple of dozen young ones every year, but a kangaroo might be lucky to have one joey a year, something like that.
So how did the numbers get so high on them then, I wonder?
It's just in these massive areas of land where they've got heaps of water available and heaps of crops available, and there have been some crazy restrictions on shooting them as well. So unless you were a land owner or somebody with the commercial harvest license, then you couldn't shoot them. But there are plenty of areas where they breed up on public land where nobody has access to them as well. Some of the bigger problems of kangaroos I've seen is around Canberra, which is our nation's capital. There are a lot of areas near Canberra where roos are in really big numbers, but nobody's allowed to shoot there. So people hit them on the highway all the time. And like anything else, I think it seems to be like there might be just one or two really good seasons when every kangaroo might have a couple of joeys, and then in the space of a couple of years, all of a sudden the numbers are out of control, which is similar to what's happened with the deer. Like the numbers of pigs and foxes can fluctuate a hell of a lot more based on what feed's available, whereas with the deer, it seemed to be a much more gradual thing. And I imagine it's a similar kind of thing with the roos as well.
So how do kangaroos taste then? That's my next question.
Oh, mate, it's look, they're very similar to venison in that it's a really lean red meat. They've got a bit of a smell about them, which I don't particularly enjoy, but it's not like it really stinks and it puts you off. It's just like, deer have a smell about them, just like pigs have a smell and kangaroos have their own smell. What I find interesting, though, is when I talk to people about the kangaroo meat they buy in the supermarket, it's in the commercial shooters' best interest to kill the biggest ones because they're getting paid per kilo or, per pound for the Americans. So the bigger an animal is, the more money that a commercial harvest is going to get paid for it. And of course, anybody who knows much about eating animals knows if you want to get a nice tasty one, you got to shoot a nice young one. So a lot of the kangaroos that are in the supermarkets are older animals. There's even a limit on how big, like if it doesn't make a certain weight dressed, then the processor won't take it. So they're trying to shoot the bigger ones. But it's just a lean red meat like venison, I suppose, mate. Maybe it's a little bit richer. If anything, it might even seem to dry out even worse than venison in my experience. But at the same time, they don't seem to hold fat in the same way that deer do. Like I've been involved in cutting up a hell of a lot of kangaroos, and they all look fairly similar in terms of a lack of fat, whereas depending on the area and the season with the deer, you can have, bucks with an inch of fat along their backs here. Or so yeah, kangaroos don't really put weight on in the same way as the deer.
Yeah, that's crazy. So people really they're in supermarkets, so everybody obviously likes eating them.
Well, it's funny, mate. Like they are in supermarkets all over the place. It's not an unusual thing to see, but I don't think Australia really has the taste for kangaroo that we should have. Like, there's nowhere near it. Like, it's not like you walk into a supermarket and there are just shelves and shelves of kangaroo. Like, it's normally a couple of small sections off to the side with some kangaroo mince and maybe some kangaroo steaks and sausages. But the vast majority of what we eat here is, your beef, lamb, chicken, pork. I reckon that depending on how much our population explodes over the next 50 years, like, we'll have to move towards eating a lot more kangaroos as a society, because it's such a sustainable meat for us to have, because nobody farms kangaroos. All the kangaroos that you see in supermarkets have been a commercially harvested wild animal. So the fact that there's all this protein running around or hopping around on two legs without any effort from anybody besides somebody going to shoot it, it's a pretty remarkable thing. So yeah, there may be a lot more kangaroo eaten in the future. We'll just have to see how it goes.
Have you been able to get in on riding around with them guys and doing some shooting too?
Yeah, mate, I've been out with a few people commercially harvesting for sure. There are people who do it as a full-time job here. Like, they might go out 5 nights a week, and it's a pretty tough lifestyle. It's pretty tough on vehicles and tough on gear and tough on families. You know, if you're a bloke doing it, you got a wife and kids at home. But depending on how much money they're getting paid per kilogram, it can absolutely be worth their while. Even in the drought here a couple of years ago, I was so sick of shooting the deer on one of the properties I go. Well, not just sick of shooting them, but, if I went out and shot 4 or 5 deer in a night and I got them and brought them home and skinned them out and butchered them, that's a hell of a lot of effort for 2 people to do. So I asked a friend of mine to come out and give me a hand, and I think we shot 24 deer in one night, which is nowhere near the biggest night that he's had, but that really helped me out on the property where I took him. And I think at that time the deer were getting $2 or $2.50 per kilogram at the chiller. So if you've got the access, then you can actually make some serious money doing that kind of thing. But some people don't like the idea of deer being involved in commercial harvests because it means there might be less deer around for the average hunter to pursue. But the bloke who actually came out with me, he is one of the most keen bow hunters that you will ever see. I actually don't know anybody who kills more stuff with a compound bow than this bloke. He's just an absolute weapon. So when he's out shooting the deer, when we did see some really big bucks in the spotlight, we let those ones go because we would have much rather chased them around with a bow or something like that. So it all exists on a spectrum, but yeah, mate, it's normally spotlight to the roof of a vehicle and then some kind of heavy barreled 223 rifle, and everything needs to be shot in the head legally. And yeah, it's a pretty schmick operation actually when you see blokes who are good at it.
I wonder why the law for the headshot only, just for saving meat, I guess, probably.
Saving meat, and also I believe to appease the anti-hunters because it's argued that it's the most humane way to kill animals, which I can see. Like, I've seen some people screw up a headshot before, but we might be talking less than 1 per 100 kills, so it's just part of the, like to get your commercial license, I believe there's even like a proficiency test. You have to prove you can shoot inside a certain group at 100 yards to show that you're capable of shooting stuff in the head from a fair way. But it's really not that hard to shoot animals in the head at nighttime using like a mirror and a vehicle as a rest, and when they're in the spotlight, like even a deer will just sit there and look at you most of the time. So it's, you can still be a really good shot, but it's not like it's that hard to shoot them out to about 200 yards.
Yeah, it's just funny to hear somebody talk about it, right? Like it's here, if I did that here, they would throw us in jail, throw me in jail.
Yeah,
not
yeah.
me.
Yeah, definitely. No, I've got some footage that I took a couple of years ago during the drought, and I'm thinking of putting a video together which just discusses some of the finer points about managing deer in Australia over the drought and that. And I've got some GoPro footage of me shooting some deer in the spotlight with my 222 rifle, and then dressing them out and taking the meat off them and leaving all their guts in a big pile down the back of a property and then putting a trail camera on there to see what might come in. So it's, I know that, like you said, in your part of the world, it just seems like a totally crazy thing to have happen, but it's just the way it is here, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's interesting. That's kind of why I wanted you to have you on to talk about some Australian hunting and different things, right? Because I look at your page and there's another guy too. He kills a heap of water buffaloes with his bow. Like he kills a pile of those things.
Yeah. That is his Adventure Today, Not Tomorrow. Is that what he's renamed his page to? I think.
I can't remember, but I know he was getting some blasted from people because, you know, I don't know if he's eating the damn things or what, but he kills a lot of them.
Yeah, man. Well, like it's they're huge animals. Obviously, so there's a stack of meat on them, but it's just like anything else. Like sometimes they're in such massive numbers, you need to take a few of them out. And when we say the meat gets wasted, what it means is nobody gets to eat it because I imagine some of those areas in the Northern Territory, it wouldn't take very long for a mob of pigs to clean up a water buffalo carcass. That's for sure. Like I've been involved in shooting horses up the Cape, like culling feral brumbies. And then we've gone back within a week to try and catch some pigs off those carcasses with dogs. And there's just nothing left, you know? So it all comes out in the wash one way or the other.
Yeah, it's super interesting stuff. I enjoy talking about it. It interests me. I always wanted to go and try and shoot some water buffaloes or scrub bulls up there with recurve. I think that'd be a blast.
Definitely, mate. Definitely. Yeah. Looks like good fun.
Well, we're crowding over an hour here. Why don't you plug your stuff one more time, your YouTube and your Instagram, and then so people know where to find you.
Cool, man. So just search Wilderlife, WILDERLIFE, or The Wilderlifer on YouTube, and hopefully I'll pop up. I really appreciate you having me on anyway, mate. Like it's been good to have a proper chat with you as opposed to just text messages between different hunts and work schedules and whatever.
Mm-hmm. You know, it was good. I want people to know, like, Australia does have some real good hunting and stuff too. So it just kind of seems like everybody's always hung up on North America all the time. So, and I always paid attention to different areas like Australia, New Zealand, and all sorts of stuff. So it was good.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And like we've spoken about before, once the world gets back to normal, you'll have to come down here and run around with me for a bit. And then I'll have to come over to Alberta and poke around for sure.
I'll put you in tight on some bears. It'll be a good time.
Hell yeah.
Okay, man. Thanks a lot.
No worries at all, bud. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave us a review. If you want to support the podcast, please check out the gear on our website at wildernesslocals.net.